What's up, Guru Nation? Let's demystify clinical research.
Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Really means a lot to me. I'm also live. I like doing this Instagram live because I don't go live on Instagram except when I do these things with Daniel and these like formal videos we have for YouTube with the fancy like multiple angles. This is an amazing setup we have going on. So thank you guys so much for watching, and just subscribe, like, comment, share. Same thing with my Instagram. Uh, this one, maybe it's not going to take that long. We'll see how long it goes, but it's about protocol amendments and what the protocol amendments trigger in clinical research. So this is not something, by the way, that's like an anomaly. This is something that happens. I think the average study has like 3 amendments on average per study. So these are things that are fairly common. These are things that your site needs to get organized on. And if you're a coordinator, you need to get organized on, and you need to understand the concept. And we're here to teach why. Like, not just how to, but why you're doing something. Because I think the why is the motivation for doing it, and the why also has the urgency, because this is something that's urgent. So whenever your protocol gets amended, not if but when, because almost all of them have amendments. Like the average, again, is I think it's 3 amendments per protocol. So one of our protocols just got amended a few weeks ago, and it actually looked like it was approved even a few weeks before that. So they send you the entire protocol, of course, but they're nice enough to send you a summary of changes, which is how nice of them, because you don't have to go read the whole thing again. Chances are you've already been trained on the original protocol. Why would they make you reread it just to figure out where the changes are? They put it nice for you right in the front. Those are the protocol amendment summary of changes. So this just happened at our site, and it was a teachable moment for the staff where I got to explain not just what we do, but why. And I think that's what's missing at a lot of sites is you're told what to do, and you're told like do it, but you're not told why. And without that, it has no lasting power. There's no sustainability factor. So if you're managing a site, or you're managing coordinators, or you're a coordinator managing others, keep in mind the why, because that's going to go a long way. So summary of changes. The why for that is they don't want you to go read the protocol and try to figure out the differences on your own. They just put it there right in front of you, so you know what's the rationale and what the actual changes are. So in this one, I'm going to try to keep confidentiality. The primary rationale for this amendment was to address regulatory feedback and to include additional lab monitoring during the IP period. So a couple of the changes were minor, like a heading was changed to make something more clear, like clarification. It even says the rationale for changing this was clarification. We made this sentence more clear. People were getting confused on this wording, so we made it more clear. Those are fine. Those are not really, those are nice, but they won't impact like site compliance. The ones that are important and urgent are schedule of assessment changes. And in this study that we had 4 visits that previously did not have lab draws. Now they require lab draws at those visits. And the reason for that was for the sponsor to get more data on at those particular visits, because apparently the FDA and the sponsor had discussions, and they agreed that they needed the extra data, so the extra lab visits. And what does that mean? If you're a site and you're sleeping at the wheel and you're not paying attention, you're not revising your source. And so now, if they just added 4 new visits where there's lab draws, and you're going by the old protocol, and you didn't revise your source, you're committing deviations every visit that you're not doing what the new protocol says you need to do. So you got to revise the source, number one. For things that impact your actual operations, like not all these changes are going to require you to change your source, but the ones that impact like the study flow, especially things like schedule of assessments, or there's another one where they modified one of the exclusion criterias for clarification. They reworded it. They actually added an extra class of drugs because I guess people were still enrolling patients on a certain class of drugs, which were supposed to be prohibited. So they just clarified that this class is not allowed as well. So you can change in that case, you would change your inclusion exclusion criteria in your source. There's another change here. It says the rationale for that was to allow flexibility. And in this case, it was remove overnight for the first sentence to read, for certain assessments, the participant will be required to come to the sites fasting. They revised the wording so to allow more flexibility. So I guess patients were, they had to come in fasting, but the definition of that was not clear, so they changed it. So then you would change that in your source as well. Another one was for clarification. So this one had maybe there's like 20 changes here. 20 changes for this particular amendment. The majority of them are clarification. So those ones, if you were clear on the protocol beforehand, you don't need to go revise your source. But if you weren't, you go ahead and revise your source and allow your staff, the coordinators, to have like a more peaceful time when they're doing a visit. Because to be a coordinator, a lot of times there's a lot of chaos happening. Like the patient wants to leave, the patient is asking questions. You might have your coworkers asking questions. You might have monitors emailing you at the same time, like, hey, make sure you're doing this. And you want to make sure that you're doing everything right. The last thing you want is to not be clear on what you have to do for that particular visit. So make your source to where it's easy to follow. And a lot of these protocol amendments, they do just that. So in this case, there were some important changes that affect the schedule of assessments. Meaning, if you don't go revise your source after reading this protocol amendment, you're not compliant. Like, you're automatically not compliant, and you're supposed to start following the new schedule of assessments in this case, or the new protocol, as soon as it's approved. And this is where the video is going to get more complex. If there's a change in study procedures or events or frequency of events for existing procedures, patients have to sign an amended informed consent. So for the most part, I want you in your head to think about this. Whenever protocol amendment, whenever you see this occurring in your study, it should trigger in your head amended informed consent, and we're going to get into that, and new training log for all the staff, including PI, sub-I, coordinator, everyone. So new training log, new informed consent, and revise the source. Those 3 things. Sometimes there's other things if they're study specific, like there's portals you need to have access to, or maybe there's a new portal they added. But for the most part, those 3 things are what you got to do. And if you don't do it, it's probably going to be a deviation. So let's go to the informed consent. If there's any change in the amendment that affects patients, meaning it's different. It's different than what they initially agreed to do when they signed the original consent. They're going to have to sign a new consent. So in our study, it's, blood draws were done at visits 1, 2, I'm just making them up now, 9 and 10. Now they added, they also need to be done at visits 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You technically have to let the patients know, like, hey, there's been a change to the study to what you initially agreed to. Here's the new consent form. Make sure you get it IRB approved first. So once it's IRB approved, once the patients agree to that consent, then you can start implementing the changes from the protocol amendment. You can train the staff on it as soon as the amendment hits your inbox. And that's, I guess, the next topic is, how do you know these amendments? If you have a good CRA, they're going to tell you. They're going to be proactive. If you have a good sponsor or CRO, they're going to let you know. They're going to be proactive. But sometimes it's just the IRB portal, and you got to go in there and make sure that it's the new amendment just got approved. You got to go in there and make sure that it happened, that you have it. Same thing with the informed consent. You won't always have a CRA emailing you the new amendment and the new informed consent. It would be nice, but you can't rely on that. You got to know where they're at in the portals. So the IRB portal is where it should be in. Sometimes if they're using like shared investigator portal like SIP from the Transcelerate program, it's going to be in there. Sometimes it's a combination of it's in both of those places. And then if you're using eSource or eReg, you got to put it in your portal as well, like Creo. So just make sure you're staying on top of these things, because if that informed consent amendment gets approved at your next opportunity with that patient, with each patient, they should sign it. Why? Because that's good clinical practice. But also why is because what if that visit is one of those visits that was affected by the change to the protocol? Well, then you need to have them sign the informed consent form first before you can implement those changes on that particular patient. It's a very common deviation to not get the amended informed consent signed as soon as the patient at the patient's next study opportunity. So it's not an emergency where you have to call in every patient and do an unscheduled visit and get them to sign the consent form, but at their next regularly scheduled visit, they have to sign the new consent form, or they can say, no, you know what? I don't agree with this. I'm not going to do this study, and then they have to withdraw. But for the most part, that doesn't happen. What happens is patients are, for the most part, willingly able to do it and are okay with it. And then revising that source is extremely important. So if you're one of those sites or one of those coordinators that's really busy and you're like, okay, I got an amendment here, another amendment on this study, I'll get around to it later. Big mistake, because how do you know without reading that summary of changes in the new protocol whether you have to amend your source? And then you have to write notes for yourself in the source. So like one of the things I love about Creo is you can write notes within Creo to help streamline the workflow. So in ours, it says, do not draw these extra labs until patient agrees by signing the new amended consent form. In our study, the protocol amendment already occurred. It's approved. We just trained our staff on it today. The PI just signed the protocol signature page. I'm going to get to that next. But we do not have the amended informed consent. So in Creo, which is our source, but if you can put it in any source you have, we have a note that says only when subject signs new approved informed consent can we start implementing these changes. This way, you're doing what you got to do, you're being proactive, but you're also respecting good clinical practice by waiting until the patients sign the amended informed consent. So, those three things: protocol amendment, I'm going to repeat. It should trigger 3 things: revised source, training log of all staff, on all relevant staff on the new amendment, and amended informed consent. The 4th thing is protocol signature page by the PI. They have to sign it. It's basically the PI acknowledging they're aware of the amended protocol and they signed it. So those 4 things, you will be compliant. This is not, again, a rare occurrence. This is actually common. It's probably happens 2 or 3 times in every study, sometimes even more. So hopefully that helps a lot of you guys out there. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye-bye.